All right, so we've been pretty busy. We created our device, we created the server, created our server callbacks, created a service, added that service to the server, created a characteristic, added that characteristic to the service, created some characteristic callbacks, or I guess just one callback, added that to our characteristic. Then we added a descriptor to our characteristic. Now all we've got left to do is some advertising. That should be easy, right? Well, it's not that it's not easy. It's just there's a lot to it. There's lots of layers to it. And that's what I think makes this BLE stuff so interesting. These layers aren't like necessarily complicating things. They're just a necessity for building really diverse and interesting things that you can do within this framework. So I think once you start to wrap your head around it, you build a couple BLE applications and stuff, it'll start, all starts to sink in a little bit. But okay, so here's this basic idea. If you recall, our device is what started the advertising. So we said BLE device start advertising. Okay, so this whole advertising thing is coming at the device level. And what we can do is we can actually define some of the advertisement data that we put out in the wild. And there's a couple different types of advertisement data that we can specify. We can say, hey, always kind of like show this stuff. And then we could say, well, only show this stuff if somebody's like asking for it or actively scanning for it. So there's some different stuff we can specify here. So it's basically, we can set advertisement data and then we can set like scan response data. Now, in order to handle the advertisement data, we've got these objects that we can use inside the library. And it's called BLE Advertisement Data. That's kind of the name of the data structure that we can use. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to just play around with some of the features of this BLE advertisement data, just to give you an idea of some of the stuff we can do with advertising. But we're really only going to touch kind of the tip of the iceberg here. But so what I'm going to do is go ahead and I'm going to write some code and then we'll talk about it. All right, so what did we do in this code? All right, well, here I am down, here's setup, way back up here. Here I am down in this code, here's the descriptors, and here's the advertising. And I wrote a bunch of code, and I'll be honest, right now, this code doesn't do much. But I think in a later, lesson when we talk about clients and scanning, some of this will make a little bit more sense. All right. So the first thing I did is I created a pointer. So we've got this P advertising as a pointer, right? And it is a pointer to a BLE advertising, this class right here. Okay. And I'm using the BLE device to get this advertising object. Okay. So my pointer is pointing to that object that's been created. So I make this and I don't really do anything with it right yet. All right. I just kind of leave it up here. Then what I do is I create some advertisement data. Finally, we have something that's not a pointer. All right, so this BLE advertisement, again, it's a class. We're making an instance of that class, advertisement data, right here. And this advertisement object, it's got some functions. It's got set name, it's got set manufacturer data, it's got a bunch of different functions. In fact, why don't we take a quick peek and see the kind of stuff. All right, we've got set appearance, complete services, set flag, set manufacturer data, name, partial, like just see all this stuff, right? So you can set a bunch of different stuff. Here, I just set two things. I set the device name and then I set the manufacturing data. You might be wondering, Mike, when we initialized our BLE device, didn't we already pass in the device name? Can't we already see the device name on our light blue app? The answer is yes, we can. But what I have found is that if you don't explicitly set the name here with the device name, not all scanners are going to be able to see that name. For example, when we make an ESP32 client, I find that just explicitly setting the name in the advertisement data helps the name to show up when you do a scan. Anyway, okay, then I also set the manufacturing data. I just said, hey, Chinese factory. And again, this is just additional information that we can send when we're advertising. It's not required. You don't have to do this when a BLE device advertises. It's optional, but it's some additional stuff you can send. Then what I did is I made another BLE advertisement data object called scan response data. Notice that advertisement data and scan response data are both BLE advertisement data objects, right? They're made from the same class. Different instances of the same class. Okay, so we can do all the same stuff to this scan response thing that we can do to this advertisement data one. Do you want to supercharge what you know about Arduino? Start writing your own code instead of just cutting and pasting? Definitely check out programmingelectronics.com. We have a training program that's been designed to get you up to speed fast, writing your own code and building your own projects with Arduino. Check it out in the link below. That's programmingelectronics.com and check out our training program there. Here, I'm also just setting the name, but I'm calling it this time extra scan data. Because if you'll recall, this scan response, what we're going to do is we're only going to pass this information during an active scan. So how do we set that up? All right, well, what we do is now we grab our P advertising object that, remember the pointer we made back up here with BLE device? All right, so we've got this P advertising object, and we're going to use this function called set advertisement data. So this is the data that our BLE object is going to basically put out into the world. And we pass it advertisement data, okay, which is this BLE advertisement data object. Okay, then what we do with our P advertising object is we use this set scan response function, and now we pass in our scan response data. Okay, so this information right here is only going to be sent to clients that are actively requesting it from a server. Now, the difference between this advertisement data and this scan response data is kind of nuanced, but here's the basic idea. A client can either be doing a passive scan or an active scan. If they're doing a passive scan, they're going to get access to this advertisement data. And this is really like the bare minimum stuff that you're going to get when you're kind of out there scanning for BLE servers. But you can also do an active scan as a client, and what that's going to do is it's going to query the server without connecting to it. So it won't actually connect to it. It's just going to send this little query, and it's going to get a little bit more information back. It's going to get the scan response data back. In our case, the additional information we send is just a name. It's going to say, hey, extra scan data. But again, there's different stuff you can set here. Okay, so we added our advertisement data and our scan response data. And finally, what we're going to do here is we're going to add our service UUID to this P advertising object. Now, it's actually already added by default. So we don't technically need this line of code. We'd be fine without this. Doesn't hurt to explicitly set it. And then what we do is we say set scan response true. And what that means is when somebody queries us for some scan response data, we will in fact send some data. Otherwise we wouldn't. All right, so let's go ahead and check out our phone app and see if this actually did anything. All right, so here we are in light blue. Here's our CIA monitoring device. And now I'm not even going to connect to this thing. And I want you to know that light blue, this app, is actively scanning. So it's not a passive scanner, it's actively scanning. It's sending out requests to get as much information from these BLE peripherals that are surrounding me. I have way too many, apparently. Anyway, so I'm just going to click this little arrow and let's see what we get here. Notice that down on local name, it says extra scan data. So that all of that stuff we did, that's pretty much all we're going to get out of that. The light blue isn't going to show the manufacturing data. You're not able to see that. But it does come in handy. Let's say when we build our own ESP32 client, we can query that information, find it, refer to it, display it, all that type of stuff. Okay, so yeah, everything else is pretty much the same. Again, no changes in here. But, oh man, that seemed like a lot of advertising code for just one little line of text. But hey, what can I tell you? 'Tis life. All right, let's get back to the code and kind of wrap this up. All right, so what did we do? Well, we got that advertising object from the device. We created and set some advertisement data. Then we created and set some scan data. Then we added that advertisement and scan data to our advertising object. And then, we added that service UUID. And that was kind of it. Man, wow, this was a lot of stuff. If you stuck around this long, congratulations to you. I feel for you having to listen to me this long. But hey, if you like learning about this stuff, make sure to check out programmingelectronics.com. We've got a ton of training like this that can get you up to speed with Arduino, and it just can be a lot of fun. So definitely check out our program over there. Okay, so let's just do a once over one more time. All right, you ready for this? So for our server, again, what we were doing was creating a BLE server. The first thing we did is we created a device and we initialized it, we gave it a name. And then we created a server, and that server gets created out of the device. Then what we did is we added some callback functions to our server, an on-connect and an on-disconnect. So when a client connects, an LED turns on. If a client disconnects, it turns off. We also ensured that we would start advertising again when a client disconnects. Then what we did is we created a service. We gave it a universally unique ID, and we assigned that service to our server, right? Actually, we told the server to create a service for itself. That's kind of how we did it. And then what we did was we said, hey, service, we want you to make us a characteristic. So we made our characteristic. Remember, the characteristics, like the meat and potatoes, it's like the actual data you want to transmit, right? So server is kind of a container for services, and a service is kind of a container for characteristics. And the characteristic is the actual values, the actual data that you want to communicate to other devices that might be querying your server. And then when we created this characteristic, we also made a characteristic callback, and we just sent the time. And we talked about, when we did these callbacks, we talked about how to subclass that callback class and, how to override those functions. All right, and then what we did is we added a descriptor, a common one, the 2901 descriptor, to our characteristic. And that was what just said, hey, this is time. It's a human readable description that we can add to a characteristic. Again, there's a ton of these different descriptors out there. Maybe we'll talk about them more in depth in some other lesson, but we're not going to talk about them now. But that's a pretty common one. And then finally, we talked about some of this advertising stuff. We set our advertisement data, which is going to be seen by any client just doing a passive scan. Then we set our scan data. That's going to be seen by clients that are doing an active scan. And we added our service UUID to our advertising object, and then we started advertising. All right, well, hey, that is a wrap. Whoa, if you made it this far, hopefully you've got an idea of how to build a BLE server. But guess what? This is only half the battle. We've only just begun. That's just our server. We actually need to make a client to, query the server. So, that's going to have to be the next thing we tackle. How can we make a client? What would be cool? What if we make a client that is a scanner? What if we make a client that basically replaces that light blue app we were using? So we don't have to use a light blue. We can just use our client to sniff around for different Bluetooth devices. Check out the description for hardware and training we recommend you use for this ESP32 BLE library. Now, if you want to watch the next video in the series, check out this video right here. Or if you want to see the full Monty, all of these BLE videos stitched together into one mega one, you can check it out right here. Either here or here. Either here or here.